our probably the most awaited interview yet. We are here with my close personal friend and community liaison officer for the City of Charlottetown, Ronnie McPhee. Welcome, Ronnie.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, sorry, Blake, go ahead.
No, we've been trying to line up this interview for a very long time. So it took COVID maybe to create an opportunity to get his attention. It's great. Thanks for coordinating.
Always dodging our calls. We could only get him at the Sportsman's on Fridays, but we were unavailable. So I guess Ronnie and I have been pretty close friends for probably the last 6 or 7 years, I guess. He was actually one of the first people I met at my first ever Liberal event. So I guess he might be one of the guiding lights that made me see the red flag. So I appreciate Ronnie for that, and we've remained pretty good friends ever since. I'm not sure what Blake thinks of that.
Well, I do have, it's certainly red flag. It's what a matador would use. So obviously it's gotten people worked up. I didn't realize you were a Liberal, Sam. I kind of don't know what to say.
Yes, sorry it took you this long to figure that
out. So you both worked in the past government's office, I guess, and some, maybe why don't we start with that?
Ronnie could give his he started a lot earlier than I did, but he could give his little rendition of what he did the past few years.
I may not look it, but I'm only a couple years older than Sam, of course. Yeah. I kind of fell into politics by accident. I didn't really come from a political family by any stretch of the imagination, but it was actually Robert Mitchell who I met at that point in time. I always love to tell the story about when I was in high school. I took political science in grade 11, and I lasted about 2 weeks and I dropped it. I hated it. I just thought you were watching politicians on TV, all the craziness that was happening in the world. I just said, I have no interest in this. They're all corrupt. They're all whatever. But I slowly learned as I move forward that there's some pretty good ones there too, and that you can actually create change from being included. So it was actually Robert Mitchell who first brought me in. I was working full time at Canadian Tire for 3 years when a Jobs for Youth summer opportunity came up in the government member's office. At this point in time, I had found myself onto the executive of the Young Liberals as vice president at that point in time. So I had 8 weeks to kind of play around, make an extra $1 an hour above minimum wage. I had full intentions of going back to Canadian Tire. I had to work full time. I've been on my own since, just after I graduated high school. So I needed the income to come in to pay rent and what have you. So I thought I was going back to Canadian Tire after that 8 weeks, but now I'm sitting here still working in, I guess, the political realm. That 8 weeks have turned into about 6 years. So I'm still waiting to go back to Canadian Tire.
Well, I think you certainly had good tutelage by a very respected member of the legislature. And in fact, he'd make a great Tory. So maybe we can get him converted. So you moved into the government office, I guess, at that point. How was that experience?
It was kind of cool. So at that point in time, I came in at the end of Robert Giz's tenure, and I'd actually credit Robert Giz resigning to actually, which helped with my longevity, because there was so much going on with the new leadership, and so all the powers that be kind of forgot that I existed for a little while. So I got to stay as the legislative assistant in the government member's office. So thank you to Robert Giz for that. But what I kind of learned through those 8 weeks to a month leading up, so I started, I guess it was in June and July. So if you really think about it, I was I've worked under 3 premiers since I've been involved in this kind of thing, and they're all different guys, and they've always had my respect. But I learned a lot because I got to spend a lot of my time with Robert Mitchell, Richard Brown, Bush Dumville, Buck Watts, and that crew that were in that, Sonny Gallant, who were in that kind of in the backbench and the government member's office. So it was kind of cool to see them, the experience that all those guys had together. I remember the conversations of them just coming in to, kind of just have some banter, and they pull you into the office and you sit there for an hour and a half, just talking about, I've learned a lot from them. So that was kind of cool. That was probably, even though that was the earlier part of my career, but probably one of the most fun I actually had.
So we had a big reveal here that you also had some colleagues in the government's office, and one of those was Sam McPhee. I still a little bit flabbergasted. I had no idea that he was even political, let alone involved with the Liberal sort of organization. But what was your experience with Sam? How was he to kind of work with?
So Sam was good. I mean, I actually really didn't get to work with Sam a lot, because when I was kind of coming in, I was making the when he was coming in, I was slowly making the transition to New Brunswick. So I kind of dodged a bullet there, I think. But from everything that I've heard from the Premier and everybody who did get to work with, myself included, he did an okay job.
Yeah, and you can make stuff up, because really, who's going to test it at this point?
And if you need somebody to give you directions throughout the province, this guy has been tip to tip. So if I don't need to use Google Maps anymore, I just go right to Sam McPhee.
One of his many talents. Sam, what are you pretty silent there? Are you
yeah. So actually, I actually consulted Ronnie on a lot of things, because when he was president of the Young Liberals at one point, and then he became a cabinet assistant, I guess, at that point. So then that was my opportunity of glory to become president of Young Liberals. So Ronnie and I remained close in that sense. And then he was actually at my, I guess, interview for when I got a government job, and I took essentially Ronnie's job that when he was legislative assistant. I moved into that role for the winter. And shortly after the spring session, I guess, Ronnie had moved to New Brunswick, and we still remained in contact. And then I moved into as Wade McLaughlin's assistant. So it's kind of funny that in the Maritime provinces, 2 of the 4 Premier's assistants were Ronnie and I. So I don't know if there's much confidence in people if they see us walking together with 2 Premiers. But Ronnie and I have always been able to communicate ideas. And if one of us was kind of bummed out at a time being, maybe, we could always rely on each other's support and guidance. Maybe if we didn't agree with what one of our bosses were saying or something, we were able to bounce ideas off each other's head and be able to kind of get through any tough times. So I think we both appreciate our respect and guidance through that. And every time I've had a professional correspondence with Ronnie, it's always been good.
I'd love to chat a little bit about sort of how government is doing this crisis, because it is a bipartisan, pretty unique challenge. And I don't think there's a lot of real partisan activity. It's really trying to get through this issue together. But first, let's talk about your role at the city. So you've migrated from big government now into a smaller government, municipal government. How's that transition been, and what's the different demands you see from the higher level now to the more grassroots level political kind of environment?
That's a good question, and I'm still learning. I mean, it's just about a year since I've been there. I guess May will be my kind of 1-year anniversary from being there. It's a lot of this. It's a lot of similarities, a lot of things that are different as well. I find if you want to kind of touch base on during this crisis mode. As the community liaison officer, I'm basically another resource for the public to use. I liaise with the community. So during this time, we've been getting there's a lot of uncertainty, right? A lot of people, you read what's going on in the news, you don't know how to kind of dissect it. You don't know, should I take everything seriously? Should I not take everything seriously? What do they mean by that? So I'm finding a lot of people in Charlottetown anyways, because the mayor and councillors they are the closest kind of level to the public. They're highly accessible. Their cell phones are on the website. So a lot of my kind of work the past few weeks are responding to emails, corresponding via phone with people who just want to get things figured out, or if they didn't understand anything, because it is highly, sometimes it's overwhelming with all the information that is coming from the province. All good information. They have phone numbers for anything that you really want to get to. So a lot of it is explaining that and pointing them in the right direction. Even though we're a small government, municipally, provincially, there's still a lot of forks in the road, a lot of directions that people need, because it can be convoluted at times. So that's been a lot of my work now. And thankfully, since I was at the provincial level, I have a keen understanding of how to kind of navigate the waters with that. So that's been a lot of my time right now.
What are some of the big issues? Like what, from a citizen's perspective, what kind of concerns are people, just generally, what are the main things that people are having challenge with?
It's with everything. So I remember when the province announced the $100 or whatever from the Sobeys gift card. So I mean, even that few days leading up to that, people were saying, okay, well, let's call the mayor and he can let us know. So even that thing, what you needed to do, what the qualifications were, like I think a lot of things in government, and including during a crisis, a lot of things are black and white. But majority of Islanders will consider themselves falling in that gray area. So it's up to people like me. It's up to people like Sam who kind of know government and how it works to make sure they can navigate, because they may be looking to one program to say, well, I don't think I qualify here, and they're probably right, but they can look at other ways and say, well, okay, well, tell me a little bit about you and your story, and you might be able to go in another direction. So that's a big piece of what I've kind of done in my whole time in working in politics and government.
And I think the important thing, like, not that we have developed contacts, but a sense we have, like, we know who to call to say, okay, this person's in charge of this program, this person's in charge of this, that we can, if someone calls us saying, I have no clue how to go through this, how can you help? It's like, okay, I'll make a call and they'll get more information and get back to you. So I think that's kind of a lot of Islanders don't understand how government functions. They don't understand, like, let's say the federal, provincial, municipal. So I think having Ronnie in a position at the town that people know that they can call the mayor or they can call a counselor, and then Ronnie will know where to guide people in terms of kind of what government program is, how do you access it, and who do you call to get to it, instead of so I think it's a good resource to have in a position like Ronnie's, that you know a friendly face that you can call that will help you out.
So what, as far as government programs, this is probably a question for council. We were very fortunate to have His Worship Philip Brown on, His Worship Basil Stewart, both on the exchange. As far as programs and accessibility, is there anything that people might not be aware of that's the city is offering
through this time?
Yeah, like, most of this is all provincial, now federal based. The provincial taps are turning down, I think, while the federal ones are turning up. Is there anything that's kind of an unknown, I guess, benefit or opportunity at the city that people should be aware of?
Not so much for application programs. Like you said, it's heavily, we are guided heavily by the province and heavily by the provincial government, rightfully so. They're the experts. We are taking our lead from them. But of course, there's things that we've done at the city, and I'll let mayor or councilor speak more to this if you guys have them on in the future. But I guess it's a lot of it is we're giving people breaks on like parking tickets and all these other stuff, because we know that the financial times can be tough right now. So as a separate program, no, I don't think there's anything explicit for this time. But we are the council's human. They have considered a lot of this stuff, and they said, well, we need to, we're going to move on from this at some point in time. But if the people need a break on, if it's a parking tickets or, how we access applications and stuff now. We had changed the format. We have a bin outside our front doors, and you can do it that way too. So not really, but we're working with the province and pushing their messaging. So if you go to charlottetown.ca, you will find basically every link to the province and the feds. We're just helping get the messaging out, because we have quite a following at the city, of course. So the more we push there, is what the city's doing.
I think the mayor's quote was the meter hornets. He's given the meter hornets a break.
Meter, yeah. What about, you might not know the answer to this. I'm curious what's happening to development permits. I mean, I guess the functions of government are still operating. So I assume if people are able to make applications, that would continue. What about the rinks? Sam really wants to play. Sam and his dad actually are both big hockey players, and they're pretty interested to play on this new ice surface. Is that still kind of something that's being discussed in certain quarters?
I think obviously right now there is a large conversation on that, but I'll leave that to council to touch on. That's for them to discuss. But I mean, rinks are quite important. So yeah, we'll axe that piece, because I don't want to get involved in that conversation.
We can't drag you down a rabbit hole. You're too politically astute, but I am concerned with Sam and his dad. They both want to play hockey, so I just want to make sure they've got facilities.
Well, in the winter months, we have that beautiful rink down at the Founders Hall, and they're more than welcome to use it anytime they'd like. If they want to leave Cornwall to come to Charlottetown.
Thanks for looking out for me, Blake. We'll switch gears a little bit. So last week, Ronnie, it was announced that the Hospice Dancing for the Stars lineup was announced, and somehow you were picked to show your moves in the fall. You want to give us a little bit of a rundown on how that happened and what it's going to happen, what you're going to do?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny, I guess. I mean, I do like to dance, Sam. You know that probably more than anybody. But I would say a month or two ago, they had reached out to the mayor. So they emailed me. So I didn't read I got the email. I seen who it was from. I didn't read the full email. So when I first read it, they want the mayor. And I said, so I talked to the mayor. He said, maybe next year. This is just not a good time with everything going down. So I replied back to them and said, no, the mayor's not interested right now, but he may be down the road. So obviously think about him next year, the year after. Just right now is not a good time. When I didn't read the next one, they said, well, how about you? So when they reached out again, I said, well, no, I already told you that the mayor has kind of, the mayor has said no to this, but I ended up just reading and said, well, what about you? And I said, okay, fair enough. It's a lot of hard work to it, I guess. I taught there's one of the girls who works at City Hall. Her husband did it last year, so I kind of picked their brain. And I said, you know what? If they took the time to ask me, I guess I can take the time to say yes and do it. So I think it'd be pretty fun. We kind of have a fundraising goal of $5,000 between now and October. And then I'm partnered with Julia Roberts. She owns her own dance academy here in PEI. So I'm going to hopefully learn from her and not step on her toes too much. But the actually interesting part is her brother is actually a part of the competition. He's one of the other stars, quote unquote. So there's going to be a little bit of a family affair there as well. So hopefully they don't, tear the family up too much.
And we had another star this season is Peter Ben Baker, and he was on the inaugural episode of The Exchange. And another former star was on a couple weeks ago, Jeff Cook. So we have a strong history of Dancing with the Stars on The Exchange. I
was there 2 or 3 years ago. I went to watch, I think Robert Mitchell was one of the stars at one point in time, and I went to watch. It's just such an exciting time, and I kind of forgot about it. And then when I started thinking about it again, I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. And so it should be fun. So we were having a call with Juliet this week. Obviously, it's a bit weird time to start dancing and practicing now, but we will figure something out in the next couple of weeks or months when this kind of this COVID thing cools down, and I'll get out and be dancing shoes.
I've seen, you're lucky to get Julia Roberts because I've seen a lot of her movies. She'd be great to be dancing with for sure. But now, so how do you do this with social distancing? And I know from what I understand, it's pretty rigorous. Like it's a grueling sort of fitness regime, I think, to even get up to snuff for this. So with social distancing, are you dancing in front of a mirror? And how do you manage this as you come out of this COVID?
So I haven't done a lot of practicing yet. I will admit, I don't have the, I live with people, and I don't want to, I have my girlfriend's here too, so I don't want to kind of chase her away by seeing my disastrous moves now. So I'll kind of wait until we're allowed to be in the same room with the professional so she can teach me a thing or two.
So, this is the first, you just mentioned you have a girlfriend, so you're not going to be on The Bachelor, you're not on this sort of reality show run or anything. This is one time.
This is a one-shot deal. I don't think I'll be getting called up to do any dancing professionally after this. I will say I was in a musical in high school. That was pretty fun. So, maybe I will find a way into a show at some point in the future.
Into acting. And Ronnie's nickname, Blake, I don't know if you know, for the last number of years has been Ron Romance. And that's when he was a bachelor for many years, but luckily has had a girlfriend for well over a year now. So up until that point, he was batching it up, and a lot of the girls knew him as Ronnie Romance. So, and even his former bosses called him that too, and still do, I'm sure.
It was always fun that when I was the cabinet liaison, one of the ministers I was responsible for was Heath McDonald, and it was always the running joke around the office that it was Ronnie Romance and Handsome Heath anytime place we went. So it was kind of funny that way, and it was I had a brief DJ career the past couple of years, and that was kind of the name we came up with.
So you've got a repertoire of dancing, music now with DJing. And thespian, you've been an actor, so you're probably well positioned to move into political realm. Any interest in getting to afternoon theater down to the legislature?
People ask. That's a very interesting way you ask that question. My answer has always been two answers: no, but never say never. And Sam can.
I think Justin Bieber used that quote before. Never say never.
Yeah, that's true. I think Sam can talk to this too. When you work with politicians, you see a lot that they go through. I mean, if if I didn't work in politics, I may would have said down the road that I would have loved to do it. But you see a lot of the background stuff. It's the politics that you find on social media now, and the ones that always kind of consumes us isn't the important piece of what they do. It's the conversations that are on the back end that are, like you mentioned earlier, the grassroots politics of, I've seen a lot of scary situations and helping people, going to their house and seeing the kind of living conditions that they're in. That obviously that piece doesn't make that's not the flashy stuff you see on social media and stuff like that. So it's hard. I have a tremendous respect for politicians at any level of government, at any party stripe. I mean, I don't know, never say never, but this where I fall within the network of politics and government is where I'm comfortable most.
Yeah, and just to touch on that, I think it's often joked that it's the craziest ones that get into politics because they're just maybe not all mentally there, but in all seriousness, there's a lot of things that are behind the scenes that no one does see. Whether it's helping one person who needs a drug to survive, and it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, but nobody sees that because they're not in it for making a newspaper article out of it. And a lot of it too, like you appreciate it more because oftentimes, especially on PEI, politicians get criticized over whether it could be anything. Oh, they get paid too much. Oh, they don't do this, they don't do that. But a politician's phone is on 24/7. Their brain is essentially on 24/7. They just find time to sleep when they can, especially in a cabinet or premier's office, cabinet minister or premier's office, because it's an ongoing. You're going 140 miles an hour versus maybe if you're in the backbench, you're going a little different pace. But I think it's easy to criticize when you're in the outside looking in, or if you're in a position that you're off at 4:00 every day. But it never stops. So you're always getting your inbox is always full, and your voicemail is usually always full too.
And I like that part of it too. It is, it kind of gets stressful at times because there is things that when I mentioned earlier with the black and the white, there's people that fall outside of the black, white, and the gray area. So there's some people that we've met with that we've tried to help that we just couldn't, given the circumstances of thousands of different reasons why. Those are the tough ones, but it's the ones that you sit down. I always tell this one when I first. It was kind of like the ebbs and flows of government programs. Of when I was first, it was actually constituents of Richard Brown in downtown. When he was in the backbench when I first started, there's this woman who she was a single mother. She was heavy into drugs and couldn't kind of get that next step forward. So between all the programs of getting her the help she needed, then getting her into EDA program to get her some work, to get her experience, to get her EI, and then once you have EI, you qualify for your school to be paid for. So in that kind of that one person that we've helped from start to finish, he went from someone who wasn't really doing all that well, to making $25-26 an hour as a receptionist at a local law firm. So those are kind of the stories I like, and kind of the ones that kind of keeps me going every day.
So I'm hearing some really strong rhetoric from a couple of people on this podcast right now that may have political aspirations. Nobody's really declaring anything. I'll certainly make my intentions known shortly. But let's change gears just a little bit. So politically, provincially, you guys both have some provincial politic experience. I don't. I'm an observer of this realm and frequent commentator. How do you think governments generally are doing to adapt to this situation? So we've got different approaches. The U.S. are opening up states. Canada federally are saying nothing's going to change. Provincially, we've done a pretty good job of managing our borders. It looks like things are going to very gradually in a managed way open up. What are your thoughts? How have government been managing this, and both you guys, and how have opposition sort of positioned themselves? Because they've been very silent, and maybe that's all you can do in this kind of environment. But how does opposition manage these crises?
I guess I'll start. Because people see, and again, going back to my point earlier about people calling the mayor's office, and even just friends and family who just know that maybe we'll just ask Ronnie. He should know. I don't know anything usually, but I think it's just one of those things that when I make the comparison to twice last year, I drove between Charlottetown and New York. It only takes a day. So in New York City right now is like a hotspot for COVID-19. So yes, we're doing things well here. I give full ups to Premier King, Dr. Heather Morris, and their crew. We are doing everything right. I mean, we've been dealt a pretty terrible hand here, and they've been doing great. My fear is that we're relatively still close to this hot spot in New York and in the states who are maybe not. Doing things the way that we would like them to be doing things. So I think internally for PEI, with everything within our control, everything is going smoothly, I think. But again, we're so close to the hotbed for this stuff, and I'm just fearful that will find its way back here if we don't, if we don't stay vigilant, and if we ease up too quickly. We are just one drive away from being right into the center of things. So I think they're doing a great job.
And I think from a political perspective, it's been well noted the last number of years that crises are always not good for government, but it presents opportunity, and governments technically never look bad. Like, there's obviously a little bit of criticizing going on, but governments always look like the good guy, like the protagonist, because they're giving money to constituents. They're fighting for their best interest during a crisis. So it's hard for governments to look bad, quote unquote. And especially opposition parties kind of just have to get it out of the way, because there's nothing you can't really criticize right away. You kind of have to wait till the programs go out. But if an opposition is to criticize instant impacts that government's trying to bring forward, they just look silly. And we've seen that actually the last couple of weeks over whether it was James Aylward not self-isolating after his thing, and some opposition members coming out and criticizing, but it's hard to criticize government and for them to look bad during a crisis, because they're putting the best interests of Islanders first.
In the case of the minister, of course, a lot's changed from the time this situation rolled out until what we know today. You've seen this from actually signing the checks that are going out to people. So there's a left there he is used at particular stance.
Check.
Yeah, kind of lost it.
Look at these special warrants that have been authorized. Situation. I had a great long tirade. Am I still there?
Yeah, we caught the gist of it. Basically, you're saying that Trump's making himself, he's trying to prop himself up during this through the stimulus checks, because he has the ability to give out free money, essentially. And I think that's how governments do benefit from it. And most often than not, if they do go through a massive crisis such as we're dealing with now, they do see higher approval ratings, because they're seen as helping their constituents and their voters at the end of the day.
I'm just looking forward to the day we get back to some normalcy. I can only assume kind of how the opposition parties are doing right now. I think there will be a conversation with anything. You look back to when we had Hurricane Juan or whatever kind of other similar situations that were kind of stirred up the normal way of life for Islanders. I think there's going to be a larger conversation down the road to reflect on how things were rolled out, just to prepare. And that's all good stuff, because we need to prepare for this to happen again. So we want to, we can learn from this. And I think, fairly speaking, overarchingly, they're doing a great job, and I commend everybody around the table. And I know a lot of them who are working incredible amount of hours going through this. So I know, but that conversation for the opposition to be part of, where they really come in, will be that conversation that happens after.
Yeah, I agree. And whether it takes a couple of months or a couple of weeks or however long to get back to normalcy, we'll see the impacts of what government's doing now. We won't see that for months down the road, because we don't know what it'll look like. Sure, the economy was shut down, basically halted immediately, but there was still kind of some money flowing through it. But then we won't see the actual impacts of the kind of stimulus injection until down the road. That's probably a good place to kind of cut our ties with Ronnie for today. We appreciate your time coming on, and hopefully sooner rather than later we'll be able to go out and enjoy a nice beer on the deck somewhere. But until then, we'll do it virtually.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you very much, guys, for what you do. I don't think there's anything similar like this on PEI. So kudos to you guys for doing this. I listen to it every time. one of my favorites, the one I did was Jeff Collins. That guy is full of wisdom. So sorry to devalue, you kind of took a step down with me there. So I hope you guys can kind of get back up and get some credible in the future.
Oh, for sure. We don't devalue yourself
we
like
pushed
that.
above our weight with Jeff.
Yeah, we still don't understand what we talked about with Jeff. Anyways, we thank you again, Ronnie, and we will talk to you soon, I'm sure.
Thank you, everyone.